Hello and welcome again. We're doing another program on Journey to Adventure for Seniors, sponsored by SCAN. And my guest again is Renee Maxwell, who is a world traveler besides being a member of SCAN. And she's going to talk to us some more about her recent trip to China. Welcome, Renee. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I know last program we had so much information, we have to do another one.
Absolutely.
Now, I just want to go quickly over what we did cover. We did cover how long your trip was, if you'd like to tell us again.
That was 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. And we talked about the airline.
United.
Okay. And the food, safety issues, hotels.
All excellent, except the airline food was not excellent. But in the hotels in China, because we stayed at very good hotels, I believe they were part of the Shangri-La.
Oh, it sounds impressive.
So if it wasn't good in reality, it was good in your imagination.
Now, you had been
the food was wonderful.
You had been to China before many
40
years
ago, yes.
And you noticed a big difference?
Absolutely in Beijing, because as I said before, in Beijing, people were bicycling, hundreds of people down the main wide alleys, down the wide main boulevards, and there was a food cellar on every corner. No more.
Really?
No more. Right.
So do you think it's changed for the better?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know for the better, but it's changed. It's certainly more modern,
okay.
yes.
Definitely. I still have in my mind China is a third world country. So.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. You're going to disavow all of that.
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
Now, besides the impressiveness, or if that's the right word, with the skyline, what about the people? Have they changed much over the 40 years?
You know, I really don't think so. I just noticed that there are so many. The young people especially are very, very modern. They have clothing from Versace and Gucci and all of these, and they're the real thing. They're not knockoffs. They are we get the knockoffs, but they are wearing the real thing. And the old Chinese tradition, of course, it was kind of abolished in the 60s during the takeover of communism. You know, many of the shrines and everything were just leveled. But there are areas called hutongs where the old Chinese people live, and you can take a trip through the hutongs with a trishaw, not a rickshaw. This is a trishaw. Okay. There's a man on a bicycle, and then there are 2 seats behind. Oh, okay. So he's not pulling them.
So it's not completely human power.
Right.
Okay.
And we go through these very narrow alleyways, which are called hutongs. Wow. And many of the older Chinese still live there very happily. Okay. Very peacefully.
Now, on our first episode, we spoke mainly about Beijing,
which is the capital.
What would you like to talk about today? What city is next on your agenda?
Well, from Beijing, which is the imperial city, we go to a very, very interesting city called Xi'an, and you spell it X-I-A-N. Xi'an. Okay. Xi'an was the former capital of China. How many years ago, I don't know. But the interesting thing at Xi'an are the terracotta warriors.
Yes.
Now, of course, the terracotta warriors are life-size. These are just replicas, okay? But these are life-size. And each one of them has a different face. Supposedly, the face of the servant who served the emperor. And curiously enough, at the base of each of them, the life-size ones, is the name of the person who created it.
Oh, each artist.
And there's a very, very involved process in making these terracotta warriors. And I think, unfortunately, that if the terracotta warrior broke in casting or whatever, they had the name of the maker there so they could, discipline him in whatever way they chose. Yeah, stern,
okay,
yes. He might have gone to...
Taken outside and chastised severely.
Yes, right. But actually, these terracotta warriors are about 2,000 years old.
Okay. I do remember when National Geographic, I believe it was, that I saw when they found them and they dug them up. There are hundreds of them. Is that correct?
Well, there are more than hundreds. First of all, they're 2,200 years old.
Okay.
And at the moment, there are 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 670 horses.
Oh, wow.
Now, this is not...
Why don't you hold that up to the camera?
Sure.
And maybe
this
we
is
can get
not
a nice
the
shot of
end of the terracotta warriors, because I'd like to show you a picture of... This is the mounds.
Oh, wow.
They were originally, and I forget for what reason they were digging, but it is in mounds like this that they discovered the terracotta warriors. Now, the terracotta warriors were on display when I was there 40
Right.
years ago, but I must tell you that now this display is huge, absolutely huge. And it's very well manicured, and they've got one area for a certain number of terracotta warriors, and then a second area for some more, and then a
Okay.
third area for some more. So it really is much, much larger than when I first saw it.
Now, I see each of these has a slightly different pose. Do you know whether or not some of them were warriors or household staff? Is there a way to tell?
Well, I'm not sure. I really don't know the answer. My impression is that they are all warriors.
Okay.
But of course, they were buried with the emperor to serve him in the next life. Now, I guess it takes over 2,000 people to serve the emperor.
Okay.
And in the museum, or in the displays there at the Terracotta Warrior Museum, they do have life-size chariots. They're not complete because they've been damaged and broken, but they are truly impressive. The wheels are, I guess, 4 feet, 5 feet in diameter.
Wow.
And even the warriors themselves are really bigger than life-size. They call them life-size, but if the warriors were that big, they must have been aliens from another planet because,
Okay.
but
But they are impressive.
they are impressive. They are very, very impressive. And of course, there are crowds of people there, Chinese mainly,
Okay.
because they come from all over the country to see the terracotta warriors, as I say, in Xi'an.
Now, I'm going to show my ignorance here. When you say terracotta, I
Yes.
always think of a tea set or a roof shingle. Is that the kind of material we're talking about?
it
A
is.
clay-based?
Yes, it is. It's
Okay.
clay-based. And you mentioned National Geographic. There was also a program on quite recently about the way that they cast the terracotta. It was quite an involved process, and you really needed master craftsmen to do
yes.
these, as I say, so they didn't break. But they were, as I say, they were cast in separate parts. They cast the head, and I believe they were cast in half, so that
Okay.
then they matched the front half to the back half of the particular warrior, and then with some, I don't know, cement or whatever
Yeah.
it is, they joined them together. But they have lasted a long time.
Great,
They've
great
lasted, yes,
craftsmen.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay. We don't have anything today I think would last the test
No,
of
I think we
time.
have built-in obsolescence. You know, your washing machine has to go out in 3 years.
Oh, you have?
Yes, I
have
do.
the
I have
same
a
one, I
washing
think.
machine, yes.
Okay. So, after you saw the terracotta soldiers at
Xi'an.
Xi'an, okay.
Xian.
Xi'an,
Xi'an.
what else was there, or where did you go from there?
Okay, well, in Xi'an, we also have a beautiful city wall, a wall that you can walk on. I guess it's about 12 or 14 people wide. I guess
So it's
that
like
would
a
be
boulevard
yes,
size.
yes,
Yes.
and of course it's raised up, and you were able to take a bicycle ride
Okay.
on this if you wished. I got about 3 feet, and then I thought, this bicycle ride is not for me.
Okay.
So
Now,
I
this
just
is separate from the Great Wall, correct? Just so
oh
you
yes,
don't
the Great
confuse
Wall
me.
is in Beijing.
Okay.
We're talking about the city wall in
Okay.
Xi'an. But I did walk along it, and of course at that height you can look into the various gardens, which are very, very interesting. And it's something to be proud of that this
Okay.
wall is still in existence.
Yes.
Okay, and still, I think there have been repairs to it, but you can see the beautiful pagoda symbols all along the wall and beautiful flags
Yes.
flying, and of course beautiful flowers. So it's a place that the locals
Well,
go.
I have not been to Asia. I have been to Europe. And one of the things I noticed was that in Europe, they seem to appreciate things from the past much more than we do here in the States.
Right.
So in Asia, where they have much longer history, some of the things they have must be truly spectacular.
Yes, but unfortunately there aren't too many of them left because of the communist of Mao Zedong.
Yes.
The regime during the 50s and 60s really destroyed a lot of that because they wanted no connection with the past.
But
But
from what
fortunately
you
there are
say
things
there,
left. This
what's
wall
left
is still
is
there.
well kept.
Yes, and we also went to a place called the Wild Goose Pagoda, which was lovely. I mean, there are many, many pagodas there. And once again, I think I mentioned in Beijing, we went to a park where there were a lot of senior citizens doing Tai Chi.
Yes, yes, you did.
At the Wild Goose Pagoda, there was a lovely young woman. Whether she's there for the tourists or not, I don't know, but she was dressed in a beautiful pink outfit, and she was doing all of these poses in front of the Wild Goose Pagoda. It was just lovely to see, so graceful. And of course, we who do yoga imagine ourselves looking exactly like this woman in the pink, but I don't think we do.
Then you have a very good imagination.
Yes, we do have very good imagination, okay? And we also went to a calligraphy school.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And I had learned calligraphy with pen. And interestingly enough, and I think I mentioned it last time, I am left-handed. So in the calligraphy pen, the nib that I use is slanted a different way.
Oh, all right.
So because most calligraphers are right-handed, and there are a few left-handed calligraphers, but this time we used a brush, as they usually use in the ancient calligraphy. You know, you have the old men sitting there with this huge brush,
Yes, yes.
and they're dipping it in the ink, and they're making these gorgeous, gorgeous figures. And of course, there are thousands of figures in the Chinese alphabet. And I said to our guide, well, how do you use the computer? You know, since it only has a certain number of letters when you have thousands.
Keys,
and she said, well, we kind of adapt the English language.
That's
yes.
interesting.
Yes.
That's interesting. I have trouble with my English keyboard. So.
Okay, well, you do well with the Chinese keyboard because it's pretty much the same as the English keyboard.
I'm a poor speller in English. I'll be a really terrible speller when it comes to Chinese.
Okay.
All right. Now, I know you've visited many, many other places. Give me some highlights while we're still on the subject of China, of the trip in general.
Okay. Well, we were very fortunate when we were in Beijing and Xi'an and any of the places. We did not encounter any pollution.
Oh, that's excellent.
We were told to expect pollution, and of course we brought masks and whatever. But we were there, I guess, at a very favorable couple of days because there was no need for the masks, and it was very pleasant. It was a cool wind blowing. It was just lovely.
Yeah.
So, you know, to say what is beautiful. One thing that I saw in my last trip that we didn't go to this time was the Empress's summer palace.
Oh.
Now, when you talk about a palace, you're talking about a big, big place, and that's where she went from the city to relax during the summer.
Oh, that must be nice.
Yes.
My palace is a four-season palace.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, okay.
I stay there full.
You stay there for
And
4
with my
seasons a year.
staff,
well,
yes.
You know, you got to have a summer palace. If you're
Maybe
anybody,
someday.
you have to have a summer palace. But of course, the nice thing about these places is that they have all of these paintings, of course not photographs, but paintings, and a lot of times they have the actual robes, of course in glass cases.
Oh, lovely.
And of course, China being the center of the silk industry, these robes are fabulous, and they have these long trains, and they have these fabulous headdresses.
Wow.
Just wonderful, wonderful to see, and you know, the long, long sleeves.
Yeah.
Of course, these empresses did nothing.
Yes, I'm sure, but
yeah.
look pretty. You mentioned about the silk. Did you see any silk factories?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Tell me
And
about
there's a very interesting story about silk. One of the empress's wives, one of the empresses was sitting under a tree having her tea, and I guess a bug fell in the cup. And of course, this was a spider.
Ooh.
And the spider had silk. And that supposedly, this might be an apocryphal story, but supposedly that's how they discovered silk. But what we saw actually were the factories making the fabric. We didn't see the silk farms themselves. But of course, silk is so fine, so delicate. And they still make the silk on the old-fashioned looms.
Really?
They are like, the looms are 2 stories high. They're run usually by a man because they take a lot of leg power.
Okay.
And they step on these pedals, and you can hear this clacking and the shuttles going and back and forth and back and forth. And they make very little silk in a very long time because it's so thin. But there also was a young girl who was decorating the silk. After the silk was made, she would be sewing on kind of like the old-fashioned I forget what they call it in the days, I guess the needlepoint things,
Okay.
you know, the frames where you could
Yes, yes.
go down and then back up. And the work she was doing was magnificent, absolutely
So a
magnificent.
lot of it is still hand.
Yes, hand done, and very, very expensive. You could buy silk scarves there if you wished. But I think one of the most interesting...
Don't tell my wife about silk
I will
scarves,
not tell your
please.
wife about silk scarves. She's got to go to China to get them anyway. And they're not cheap in China, let me tell you that. But one of the things that I saw which was most interesting was a silk screen with two sides. You put it in a frame and then you can display both sides. But what was different was that the picture on one side was completely different from the picture on the other side. Even though they used the same outline, the picture was completely different.
wow.
Now that
That's
takes
artistry,
talent. That
yes.
is artistry, yes, yes.
Okay. We still have a lot of ground to cover, but we're going to take a break here.
Okay,
And then when we come back,
we're going someplace else.
I would like to talk about your trip on the river.
Okay,
Okay?
very
All right,
good.
we'll be right back. Please stay with us. You're going to love this. Stay with us.
So, if you're over 65, like me,
and active and fairly healthy,
Being active and healthy alone will not protect you.
Remember, the immune system weakens with age.
And if you're over 65, ask your doctor about your vaccination options.
we want you to be healthy and active.
Welcome back. Renee is still here. She's still got a lot to tell us. Renee, I want you to tell me about pandas, or panda bears, as they say.
Well, as you mentioned, pandas are not bears. No matter what Teddy Roosevelt says or anything, pandas are not bears. I believe they are marsupials.
You might be right on that one.
Yes, I think so. And when we were at the Sheraton Hotel in Chengdu, which is where the panda sanctuary is, we were given a panda
Very nice.
on the bed. Isn't that sweet? A nice remembrance.
very nice.
They didn't do that 40 years ago. Okay, though they
Okay.
did do it now. I guess they're cutting more into
So their hospitality
yes,
has increased. Okay.
absolutely, okay. And this is the third city, Beijing first, Xi'an being second, and Chengdu third.
I must say, I have to stop you. I must say, you do these languages very well.
Thank
I
you.
have trouble saying Tinton Falls, but you just, they roll off your tongue so easily.
Well, I was a drama teacher. What do you expect?
Okay.
Now, 40 years ago, and I keep mentioning that, when I went to see the pandas, I got a T-shirt, okay?
Very nice.
And they don't have these anymore.
So a real collector's
No,
item.
they don't have these
Okay.
anymore. So I was very, very glad that I got mine 40 years ago.
When you did, okay.
Yeah,
That is
okay.
lovely.
And I believe, I don't know what this says up here. I've had 40 years to find out, but there's a, I will find out what it
Okay.
says. It may say Chengdu, okay. But this is one of the most fascinating parts because at other places you're seeing buildings
Mm-hmm.
or you're seeing things that are dead. And of course the pandas are delightful.
Yes.
I might be seeing their great, 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 great grandchildren from my my
Right,
trip
they
40
do
years
have
ago.
a,
Yes, yes. So they have a lineage, but they
a
are
husbandry
adorable.
program? Would that be the right term?
Well, I hope so.
A breeding program?
Because they
Okay.
have been near to extinction for a
Yes.
long time, and you know they bring a panda occasionally to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
but they only can bring it here for 6 years, I think.
Okay.
And of course, they eat a tremendous amount of bamboo, which is their,
yes.
you know, their natural
Diet,
That's
yes.
their natural diet, yes. And the panda preserve is fabulous. It's a huge park, and situated around the park, they have various compounds for pandas of different ages.
Oh, okay.
And there's usually a house that's raised, and then some kind of a ladder or a slide, and lots of bamboo and lots of greenery.
So it's almost a natural habitat.
Oh
for them.
yes, as you look into it, you really
Okay.
feel as though you're looking at these pandas in their natural habitat. But I think the most delightful parts are when we get to the pandas that are 2 or 3 months old, because they're rolling around and
Okay.
having such a wonderful time, completely oblivious of all the tourists snapping their pictures
Yes.
and whatever. and they're going up the stairs and they're falling down
So they
and they're
must be
falling
like
on each other.
toddlers of any species.
Yes,
Okay.
that's true.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful, really wonderful.
nice.
And of course, they have many foundations where you can give money to the Chengdu Preserve and whatever. But I really say that of the sites that you really should see, where you will see nowhere else in the world, is this Chengdu Panda Reserve. So please be sure to go there. It's very welcoming, very, very interesting, very informative. It's quite a walk, but you can walk as slowly as you wish because the pandas will still be there.
Just your reaction, watching you, that must have been a highlight of your day.
It really was.
Okay.
It really
Excellent.
was, yes. And if, say there are many more than there were, as I recall, 40 years ago, because I think they've taken a concerted effort to popularize these pandas and to make
Yes,
sure that they
yes.
are.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the panda may be the mascot for the World Wildlife Federation.
I believe you're correct.
You know, so a lot of
believe
people
you're
all over
correct.
the world know about panda bears.
Yes, because as a matter of fact,
Ah, there we go.
look what we have. We have a map of the World Wildlife Federation, and there's a panda on it. So I
Now,
think you're right, Jim,
do
and you
all-
didn't even know I had this,
I didn't.
did you? No,
I
no,
was
no,
very
good,
surprised.
Good, good.
Do all pandas look the same, or are they like zebras where, to me, they look the same, but individually they can tell each other apart, have different...
Funny you should ask that,
Okay.
because there is a red panda.
Oh,
Yeah, not a bright red, kind of an orangey red, but they don't consider it one of these pandas.
Oh,
And you
really?
know, they even have a different name for it, and I'm sorry, I should know the name for it. But there were only 2 or 3 of them. So when you talk about the Chengdu pandas,
Okay.
you're really talking about the black and white
well,
pandas.
I would like you to come back, because you still have a lot more to tell us.
Absolutely.
And maybe you would find out about these other pandas. I happen to like pandas. They're one of my favorites. But when you come back, I want you to tell me about a river trip that you took.
All right.
And like I say, I'm bad with these Chinese words and languages. What's the name of the river?
Yangtze
The Yangtze.
River, not the Yellow River.
Not the yellow, the
Yangtze
Yangtze
River.
Okay.
Right.
Promise you'll come back.
I'd love to.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I want you to come back next time, and I've already talked to this lady about it. We're going to talk about our trip to Africa. Now, that should be exciting. Africa is a place I've always wanted to go since I was a boy, so I'll have to go there through you.
Well, I've been there twice.
Excellent.
So the third time you can come with me, okay?
Okay, thank you. Be sure and join us again. Till then, get out, have an adventure. Bye-bye.